This content is for informational purposes only. You should not construe any such information or other material as legal, tax, investment, financial, or other advice. Nothing contained on here constitutes a solicitation, recommendation, endorsement, or offer by Draper, Goren, Holm, or any third-party service provider to buy or sell any securities or other financial instruments whatsoever. And we have an awesome media partner, Blockchain Radio, where you can catch this recording on afterwards. And Blockchain Radio actually just did an 11-hour marathon this past weekend on blockchain and booze, which was really cool. They did 11 straight hours of me and all the guests. And I tuned in through my Alexa, and it was like interesting hearing me play around around the house. And also you could catch the recording on our YouTube channel at Draper, Goren, Holm. And today we have a very special guest with us, Ian. How you doing, Ian? Thank you for joining us. We're going to be talking all about blockchain, crypto regulation, smart policy, and your time in your political career in general, right? So welcome to Blockchain and Booze, my friend.
Nah, thank you for having me. I'm excited about it. You know, you guys are all, both of you and everybody watching us, a lot more educated in the space of blockchain, but you know, I have a little bit of relevant political experience, being one of the only folks actually working on this from a policy standpoint in the state legislature. So I'm excited to talk about this stuff. I love it, and I'm really excited about the future that this technology holds.
Awesome. And I think before we kind of dive into like the sticky questions, maybe just give us an intro, who you are, what you've been doing the last 10 years, and all that good stuff.
Yeah, of course. So I grew up, my parents actually divorced when I was really young. And so my mom moved down to Southern California. My dad stayed in the Whittier area. And my dad was a longtime politician representing kind of San Gabriel Valley area. He was elected to the state assembly in 1982, then the Senate in 1990, and then again in the state assembly in 2006. But I was born in 85, and so I grew up around politics and learned the value of public service at a really early age. And of course, always told him that I would never do what he does. Politics is his life, not mine. You know, I because of where my mom lived and my proximity to the ocean, I started surfing, and I did that a lot. I gained a lot of sponsors. I did a lot of traveling, a lot of competing. You know, Hurley International was my main sponsor. But at some point, I kind of decided that, you know, there were so few people really making a living doing professional surfing that I would go to college. And so I went to Long Beach State, and I still kept surfing and kept active. And as I kind of neared my career, I started working for Hurley, and so I got some private sector experience. And I ran their retail marketing, similar to Nike Eakins and what Nike Eakins do for Nike, because Hurley was owned by Nike at the time. So I did a lot of that work. My territory was basically Long Beach to Santa Barbara, Goleta, out to Palmdale and Victorville. It was a huge LA Inland Empire territory that I covered and managed our VIP accounts and just kept everybody stoked on the brand, pushing the product. You know, I love the industry. I knew virtually everybody in the industry, and I enjoyed that work, but I just felt like I wasn't getting what I wanted out of a career right away. And so, you know, I decided to go and work for the state assembly as a field representative, and actually working in some of the areas that I grew up in the Whittier area. And my first week, it was kind of, as we're still trying to recover from the recession, I got a single mom, gave me a call. I lost my job, down and out, trying to get unemployment benefits through EDD. Anything you could do to help, I'd really appreciate it. And she'd been trying to call for months, try to get to the right person, be hung up on, stayed on hold, you know, for 3 hours at a time, never get through to anybody. And within a week, I was able to get her that unemployment benefits. And she called me, and she's just like, I just want you to know how important this was to me and what this meant. I'm a single mom. I didn't want to lose my job. I was forced into this position, and I'm going to work really hard to get another job really fast. But this was my rent so that I can keep a roof over my kid's head, food on the table. And that really impacted me to a significant degree, because I just felt like, wow, I can actually do something, and there's a lot of real value in doing this work. And I knew that, but until you experience it and you've done something to try to impact the lives in a positive way of someone other than yourself, you know, that's an impactful, powerful thing. And so I decided to run for office. I started my campaign for the state assembly, the 57th Assembly District, at 25 years old. raised about $800,000 to get my name and my likeness out there. And just after turning 27, I got elected to the state assembly. And I was the first millennial ever elected to the state legislature. And then I ended up becoming the majority leader a couple years later. And I'm the youngest majority leader in the history of the state of California, becoming the majority leader at 30 years old. And I'm also the longest serving majority leader of any house in the state legislature in term limited era. Term limits came about in 1990 with a referendum on the ballot. And so during that time, I've served in this position longer than anybody else has served in this position in either house. So I've spent a lot of time working on a lot of different issues. I was the co-chair of the Legislative Tech and Innovation Caucus with a colleague of mine, Evan Lowe. It was something I tried to start beforehand, but it was hard to get before he got to the legislature, and he's out in the Silicon Valley area, Campbell. And it was kind of tough to get the caucus started without him, because I couldn't get a lot of interest. But when he got there, and we can kind of approach it from this north-south representation perspective, we were able to get members to join, member companies to join, and it was just a lot of fun. But then I kind of happened upon blockchain. And then I just got really interested in wanting to write some policy, just because I feel like there's so much potential for this technology and what it can do. I mean, and really, it kind of started with, voter engagement and being able to at some point vote on this. And I think that blockchain, the technology, is going to enable that one day and increase voter participation. But there's just so much more to that, and we can get into that. But that's kind of my story and my background in a nutshell. And to finish it off, I've left the legislature. This was my last year. I served 8 years in the state assembly. I decided to step away just because you have to be full-time pretty much in Sacramento. My life is in Southern California. I have 3 really young kids. And so I ended up stepping away and starting my own consulting firm, consulting and strategic advising firm, Majority Advisors. I launched that on December 1st, and it's been really great. There's been a lot of interest. And I get to continue to work on issues and in the areas that I worked on when I was in the legislature, and things that interest me, including blockchain.
Yeah, it's super cool because, like you said, there aren't a lot of, I guess, political representatives in the space. It's growing, right? There's more and more, and I feel like more and more come into the picture every time there's a new Bitcoin cycle for whatever reason, right? You being a millennial, you being one of the first, or the first, you said, millennial to join a group like you did, and you being so purpose driven, right? And joining and kind of pursuing a political career based off that story that you told us. How does blockchain now come into the picture of this, right? So you're a very purpose driven person. You want to serve the people, right? What is it about this technology that kind of motivated you to take more of that technological route, right? And build policy and push these working groups to kind of better the space as a whole?
Yeah, as a member, one of the things that always really interested me was, moving beyond the status quo of things, moving beyond the status quo of issue areas, and not only issue areas, but then the way in which people advocate and push for different policies in the legislature. And it always felt like, and this was kind of reaffirmed during my time in the legislature. It's like you just have the same issues that continue to be at the top of the docket in terms of policies being authored and being authored in the same ways that policy has always been authored. It's just kind of like this monotonous dun 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 way of doing policy and everything else. And so I always really tried to look at different ways to join the conversation in productive ways that I thought was going to be better for the state as a whole, not just the district that I represented, which was just under 500,000 people, but what I did impacted all 40 million people in the state of California. And so, I was looking, I worked a lot in the tech space, but then blockchain kind of happened upon me. And then I tried to look into it a little bit. And like I said, getting to this position of, okay, this is a technology that I thought was a little bit difficult to understand. But when you really start to lean in and figure out, like, okay, there is, you can use this technology to streamline the way government does business, the way government provides services. It goes right back to that story I told you about unemployment benefits from EDD. Look at all the trouble EDD is in, and all the mess ups that have been having that they've been having. Imagine if they had this technology helping them out, and delivering services to our constituents, and and doing it in a way that didn't take 3 hours or 4 hours on the phone or several weeks to get it done. And government, we want nothing more than to provide these services to people, but we're so fucking bad at doing it. And it's so frustrating, especially when you work so hard and you author some policies and you're just like, okay, that fixes the problem. It doesn't fix the problem. It just continues to get worse. And so we need to modernize the way government does business, the way government provides services. We want more people to vote. Well, you got to have immutable technology that's going to allow that, so that you cannot, so that outcome isn't corruptible, so that those results can be trusted. And blockchain technology, I saw as a technology that could do that, and that was capable of doing that. But there's just a whole host of issues. But I thought, here's something that, I feel like the state should be weighing in a little bit, at the very least, providing some policy to try to attract these businesses. So what I did was I authored a bill specifically to create a blockchain working group that was run by GovOps, which is within the governor's office. And it's just to provide policy recommendations to the legislature on the best uses and practices of blockchain, and create some type of definition around blockchain. My bill loosely defined it as something pretty shitty, but because it's really complicated. And when we started working in the blockchain working group, was just a lot of different interests, a lot of company entrepreneurial engagement, consumer protection side, to the academic side, political government side, and I think the single hardest thing that we tried to work through, beyond offering these policy suggestions, was how to define blockchain. And I wish I had it up, otherwise I'd read exactly do that. I'd read that and how we define that. But it's just, you have to, within government, you need recognition, but also at the same time, you can't be too prescriptive, because then you limit the ways in which that technology can be beneficial, but then not so broad that it really doesn't, speak to the technology in general, and, doesn't really provide the type of protections. But, a lot of folks that I talk to within this space, it's, guardrails and some recognition from government is really needed, and it's just kind of like this thing that people hold at arm's length. But if we could get some real policy making around this technology, real engagement from regulatory agencies, like the Department of Business Oversight, I really feel like California, if we act fast, we can just be this huge, blockchain crypto hub where businesses are coming here. And so, and we're benefiting in that way from the state. The state has a lot more say around how do you govern, and regulate this technology, and we benefit as a state as a whole. So I really feel like, my efforts were really dedicated towards bringing this technology into the light, so that people and members could stop being so afraid of it, because they hear blockchain or crypto and they just think, oh, there's nefarious ways in which it's used, and we don't want to touch it, we don't want to allow that. I mean, I authored a crypto bill to basically say, AB 2150, which basically said that cryptocurrencies are not securities, because based on what the work that the SEC has done, they've already said they don't qualify as a security. When you apply the Howey test, they don't qualify as a security. So what I tried to do is, which I thought was low-hanging fruit, was exempt them from securities law. And I got it out of the assembly with a huge bipartisan vote. But then and that's with the DAs losing their shit, the district attorneys. But then the Department of Justice came in and said, no, we're going to oppose this. And really, ultimately, the reason why they opposed it is because when there's no certainty, or there's no specificity around the laws governing this policy, you can come out and you can prosecute in a lot of different ways. And so that's really shitty from a company's perspective, because why are you going to do business in a state where anybody can kind of come at you, and the only adjudication is actually going to court and having the Howey test applied to you, and being adjudicated or having it relent that way. And so when the Department of Justice came in and said, okay, we're out, we're opposed, I switched the bill to being a kind of like a safe harbor, a corporate safe harbor like Delaware, but for California, for this technology and cryptocurrency specifically. I ended up getting held in Senate appropriations, and so I couldn't get it to the Senate floor, and that was my last year, so that was a disappointment. But I worked with DBO on it. DBO, the Department of Business Oversight, they're into it, and I think that that's something that they would be willing to do. And then COVID-19 and what that did to government, that certainly really threw a lot of things that weren't specifically COVID-related policies, put us in a tough spot to move those forward.
It's funny to think that, because this space in the last 9 months or so, because of COVID, has actually accelerated with everyone being home, everything being digital, and all these things. Like you started off part of what you were talk about voting and how inefficient the government is with certain things. And what's funny is that like there are DAOs in the space. So DAOs, for anyone that doesn't know, is like a decentralized autonomous organization, right? There's a bunch of people with Ethereum wallets voting on which direction the protocol is going to go, right? And a lot of these DAOs actually set up the votes so that after the voting period is done, a certain amount of time elapsed, just in case somebody finds something wrong or whatever. And once that time period, like 48 hours goes on, it automatically implements the code for what the vote was. So if people voted it down, nothing happens. If people vote for it, it happens. Imagine if EDD worked that way. There's a stimulus package. The government votes on it digitally from home because you can't go in because of COVID. That's fine. You could do it on your phone or on your computer. Once everyone votes, imagine they just click a button that the vote is complete and everyone's distributed their money or their stimulus just instantaneously. It's totally possible, and it's not that complicated, right? It's just so funny to think about that in this world, right?
But from a government perspective, they look at this is an unknown. I don't know what this is. I don't know what this necessarily means. I mean, Manny Alvarez working in the Department of Business Oversight. He is pretty keyed in and supportive. I mean, he did some work with Brian Brooks when he was at Coinbase on some stuff, and actually Brian was helping us craft 2150 before he went over to the comptroller's office. But
and he's been great the last few months there. We had him like one of his first weeks in that office at the latest LA Blockchain Summit that we did virtually, the one that you came in person to last year. So, and he's just been killing it, and it looks like a lot of the folks in Congress and in the Senate are actually sort of pushing against him, saying he's being too favorable towards crypto, which is kind of fun.
Which is, that shouldn't be surprising.
Yeah, no, not at all.
There's no secret there as to why he is. But the disconnect is, getting to the point where you can even have a conversation with a government agency about this technology and why it's so beneficial. And actually, I believe that there are opportunities now, given all of the troubles that EDD has had, for a technology like this to kind of come and flood onto the scene. I mean, and that's really where I've positioned myself to be. I mean, I know a lot of folks within the governor's office, within the some of the senior advisors as ledge director, as well as some of the folks that are running these agencies, and so to connect folks to these people to try to get these types of technologies recognized a little bit faster, and do some more work in this space and implementation of this technology, but while also at the same time, when I first authored my blockchain working group bill, it was just like every member you talk to, over their head. Ian, I don't know anything about this, but I know you and I trust you, so I'll be with you and support you on this. And again, it was a working group, so it wasn't like we're necessarily codifying anything major in statute. We were just putting in place a working group to to develop some policy recommendations that go back to the legislature along with defining blockchain. But that definition of blockchain still has to be voted on by the legislature to be put in place and codified in statute, which would be really helpful. And then, so we're just, I kept doing that. And every time we authored a new policy, especially, I also did AB 2004, which is a verifiable credential bill that just, basically authorizes users to be issuers of verifiable credentials. There's nothing in law right now that says you can't, but there's also nothing explicitly saying that you can. It's an opt-in type thing, but then also it would have created somewhat of a working group around that policy to come up with recommendations on how to implement that type of a program from a state government perspective. But because there was like $1 million cost to it, and we were in a position where we were just suffering, we knew we were going to be suffering from an economic recession. All things that weren't like really specifically COVID related were just getting vetoed, and that bill got ultimately vetoed. And so people can still, be issuers of verifiable credentials. It's just we need more substantial policy to be passed and put in place.
Yeah, I mean, it would be really, really great. So from specifically the perspective of you, and now you've transitioned into consulting and doing that kind of thing, how can crypto companies use your help navigating these waters? What's the best way the industry or companies could maybe, let's take it to the next level? And then I know we have a bunch of questions that we could go back towards more state-specific stuff, but would love to hear how can you help now?
Yeah, I think, I've positioned. Look, I was when you think in terms of leadership, at least within the assembly, the leader of the assembly is the speaker. Below the speaker was myself as the majority leader, and I have the relationships within the legislature, and I'm banned from lobbying the legislature for a year, but I'm not likely to lobby anyways, even after that year ban is done. But I have relationships with these people, so it's more like, okay, connecting folks and having a conversation, building a team that's actually going to make a difference when it comes to advocacy. So not just me on the consulting side, but then who do you have as a lobbyist that's pushing these things? Ali Medina. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Ali Medina, but the Blockchain Coalition. We did a lot of work with her, and she has a lobbyist, Nimala Pappas in Sacramento, and so they work on stuff, and she's been able to be successful. She worked with us on the 2150 crypto. She worked up with us on the verifiable credentials 2004. But it's okay, what do you want to do? Who's your team? I can work directly with your team and connect you with folks that you need to be connected to in order to be successful. But if you don't have a team, I can help you build a team. And then it's just developing a plan in terms of, okay, what is it that you're looking to do, and where's the best place to start? Authoring a policy, how a bill becomes a law, all these types of things. I did this. I know this intimately. I know the people that I know the players in both houses, including the governor. And so it's just using that relevant experience in my relationships to push these policies and allow for there to be a conversation where there might not have been without my involvement. And then also working within the governor's office, because I take a look at this space right now, and I just see nothing but opportunity when it comes to, okay, tracking and verifiable credentials with the COVID-19 vaccine. I did a lot of work in entertainment sector, specifically movies. They're going back to work because they're creating these bubbles, and you test in, you stay in, test, quarantine, get in, and then you don't leave. You got to test again to get back in. But things can happen if you can have some type of verifiable credential system where it's like, okay, hey, I'm keeping you updated, production updated with where I'm at, what I've been doing, how I'm feeling, and then at the same time I'm being tested. This is when I got tested. This is who's issuing it, and it's somebody that's approved to issue that verifiable credential and everything else. So there's just a lot of this in this space where I feel like tracking the vaccine and who gets vaccinated and making sure tracking people, but being able to say, I got the first round. Here's a reminder that I'm going to need my second round of the vaccination because it's a two-step process. If I need to get back to work, I can show this is when I was tested, or this is when I got my vaccination. I've had that first round. I've had both rounds. I just feel like there's just so many applications, helping the government better track where these
there's like automation, essentially, right? Automating that
Yeah.
entire process.
Right. And I just feel like you could use blockchain technology and it would be very relevant right now dealing with COVID and making sure we're getting people vaccinated. We understand where we're at in that process, and we can rely on that information. Whereas I don't know how they're tracking it now. I don't know what mechanisms they're using. And again, as we've seen, like with EDD and the disbursements of benefits, you don't know who's getting what. And if they're using those same tools to track vaccinations and where the vaccinations are at, and everything else, I feel like blockchain could streamline that and make it more efficient.
One thing you brought up in the beginning when you were telling us more about your story and your background is the specific example of voting from your phone, right? Whether that be for local elections, state elections, or the US elections. It might be, the question might be kind of going on a limb here, but how far away do you think we are from actually, I guess, engaging in a voting process from our phones, from our laptops, rather than going to a physical location and casting ballots, or casting ballots from home, from like mail-in ballots, for example?
I feel like we just got further from that in this last election. We didn't get closer to it. Mail voting it's no secret. It's been around for decades. And quite honestly, Republicans have used it more than Democrats. And, this was always my frustration as well within government, whether you were a Democrat or a Republican, the rhetoric around these different political issues that aren't necessarily legitimate concerns, but they're used as these political wedge issues to try to, scare people into voting for you, or, scare people away from voting from the other person. And, it has an impact on democracy. And, it's like, some of my closest friends were my Republican colleagues. We are very close. I have Republicans in my family. That doesn't make them less family. It's not about that. My problem was always just, it's hard. I know. But now it's, relationships are being destroyed because of it. I mean, but for me, it's like, when I talk to folks and, the whole Trump issue, the issue for me was never the Republican Party. It was always just Trump and what he represented because of the dangers I saw that he was posing to our democracy. And then when you see this play out and the rhetoric that he's been using and how, really the leaders, haven't been pushing back against that. In politics, reality isn't reality, perception is reality. So if you cannot, definitively say this did not happen, it might as well have happened. You're not going to you're not going to convince people otherwise. I mean, look at the shit that people believe now. I mean, and it's just like, if it comes from, if it's confirmation bias, it's just confirming what I want to see, regardless if it's fact or not. That's what people are attracted to. And that's what they want. And so we had this issue with mail-in ballots, and it was Trump said he was going to do this. He projected this. He was very clear that he was going to undermine in this way. And he was going to accept the results as long as he won. And if he didn't, it was going to be fraud. I mean, he said this himself. And so we knew it was going to come. But because he did that, now something that we've been using for decades. And I'm telling you, I've used this, and they've been used in my elections, everybody, all elections, for the last couple of decades, that has been undermined, where you have 75% of one of the country's major political parties that believes that this election was a sham and that it was stolen from the president, and that with zero evidence, with 59 court cases being lost, of finding zero proof that there's been fraud. Now you're in a position where people believe it, and so now you're going to go to cell phones and you're going to start talking about Russia. You're going to start talking about China, and everybody's idea of how information is stored on these servers and can be hacked and manipulated. the idea of blockchain, it's going to go over their head. They're not going to understand it. They're going to be like, no, I don't think that, I talked to 10 people today and all of them said are voting for this guy. And then this guy won. That's bullshit because I saw it myself. And so that must have been hacked by China. China did it. And there's no doubt, influence being, things that are happening. That
it's a double-edged sword with technology too, because we curate our own, bubbles online, right? Like all of the people we follow on Twitter are the people we choose to follow on Twitter. All the people that we have on Facebook or Instagram, we choose to be connected to. And so then you get this echo chamber also. And some of the it's sort of been happening since the beginning of social media, and now we're getting to some kind of probably some tipping point in some direction with the news and everything else. But like, it used to be a joke, right? I actually, my first like legit real job in tech was at MySpace, and it used to be a joke, like when you would say something like, well, I read it on the internet, so it must be true. And we would joke about how you could like, this was at the time when The Onion and stuff like that became like real. And it was so funny to watch your friends and family and people fall for the stupid fake headlines. And now real life, like, there are like, versions of that in real life that are, my parents will send me a text, oh my God, did you see this? And you're like, that's not even a real news source. That's just some BS, it's absolutely crazy. And nobody's trusting it, right? Like we went from, oh, this is one of the best things for humanity to this is one of the worst things for humanity in like a span of a year or two.
But even the algorithms in search engines like Google, I put something in because I want to learn something. Well, they're going to show me what they believe I want to see, not unedited factual information. That's
what will make the
sources. It's going to be the worst, and that's for both sides. This isn't a left-right issue. We're all in this, and we all are in our own way, buying into it and playing into it. And then when you have politicians, regardless of what side, kind of fanning those flames, and that's what becomes really scary and detrimental to our shared kind of global, meaning American, democracy and values, and how. It's kind of like we're working against ourselves. And so rhetoric matters, and the information we're consuming matters. And, it's like you see, when you see that there are, I'm reading one of your, David, he's an interesting guy. David Goldsmith, he's interesting. Affidavits, anybody can file an affidavit. It doesn't have to be true. So, I'm glad I'm speaking to my family too. We're good. We're all good. But anyway, so, this isn't, I'm not trying to make this political in any way. I'm just, it just all speaks to the question of, really, do I believe that we're closer to voting on our phones? No, I think we're further away from it. I think people we need to all come back to reality. And our goal needs to be having a healthy democratic society. And it isn't about, like, as much as I may be a Democrat and I want Democratic candidates to win, doesn't mean I agree with everything that a Democrat says. But if they win, I want them to legitimately win. And I want them to be people that, it's all done in a legitimate way, and it's, fair for everybody. So I just feel like in order for us to get there, we have to all come back to reality a little bit and understand that we're all in this together. And it isn't about who's winning. It's just about making sure that we all have faith in the system. And because democracy thrives on an informed electorate and everybody having faith in the institutions that govern us. And there is no faith in the institutions that govern us. And even the people that are, and including the people that are the purveyors of those institutions.
Yeah, so I'm trying to think of, so you're basically saying we just need to come back to earth. We need to be less divided as we are right now. And then we can talk more about the discussion of involving technology when we dictate the election process. That's what you're basically coming down to, right? Right. So, yeah, I mean, it's an interesting topic because we're seeing it, like voting and governing rights being kind of like created and tested. And I guess somewhat validated, like Alon said, on the DAO level, on these decentralized autonomous organizations, people casting their votes, changes being implemented autonomously, automatically, similar to some of the characteristics that you were saying with the COVID vaccine, right? So it'd be interesting to see, like, at what point will everyone become united as opposed to divided? At what point can we become more technologically advanced, right? Having more individuals like yourself with the millennial perspective, kind of being born and not so much with an iPhone in their hand, but being very comfortable with technology, not afraid from it, right? Embracing technology and seeing that there is opportunity versus turmoil, right? And with that, I want to jump into the QA. And the first one comes from an anonymous individual. Okay, so any thoughts? And tell me what direction you're on. I don't know how technical you are, right? Versus falling more towards the policy side, and you understand the technicality of this stuff. For example, one of the questions is like, any thought on governance tokens and how they kind of integrate themselves into the future of policies, right? And I don't know if you're familiar with governance tokens, if you've messed with DeFi and whatnot, but feel free to guide me here.
Yeah, no, I haven't messed with them. And I mean, I have, a vague understanding of tokens and their uses. I mean, I think that there's a future for that. I just can't say where we would be right now. I mean, I think that there's so much that has to happen ahead of time just to get the government to recognize it as a legitimate, a source of to use for different issues. It's hard to say when we could get to that
I'll
point.
throw out there just to sort of a little bit help answer the question for anybody out there. So I've been having to deal with securities laws for raising money on the internet now for over 10 years. So pre the Jobs Act being signed in 2012, we were trying to convince people that they should be allowed to raise money on the internet in the same exact way we raise money offline, but use the technology that we use every day to help us amplify the process. And back when I started doing those kind of things, it was against the law, and it's called public solicitation. Public solicitation was completely against the law at the time for private companies. And now that's changed, and there's certain rules and things you have to abide by and do to make sure. The issue with governance tokens, and governance tokens, for anybody that doesn't know, are tokens these DeFi projects put out there. They sort of represent ownership of this decentralized organization, but this decentralized organization isn't an LLC, isn't a C Corp, maybe sometimes is a foundation somewhere in the world, but essentially it's just a bunch of people doing something on the internet, and there's nothing there. But the governance token holders sometimes will receive dividends, sometimes will just get to vote on something and they have no other right, and they have all these different rights. And the issue with it is probably less, is it fair, is it not fair, whatever. It's more for government, is this a security or not? Because most of them, people are really, really hasty to launch them, right? And they just want to, yeah, Joe, my shirt, sorry, just went back to the chat. But the issue with them is that companies will just go on, or not companies, DAOs, decentralized organizations, will just come out there and be like, we have a governance token, and they'll just throw it out there and start selling them before they have enough decentralization, before they have a product. And if you sell something that represents ownership of something you haven't launched yet, you're never going to convince the regulators that it wasn't a security. So now you just, did securities fraud, whether you meant to or not, whether you had good or bad intentions. And securities fraud, unfortunately, in the United States is a pretty intense crime. You don't ever want to get caught doing that. So you want to make sure you have a product launch. You want to make sure it actually is decentralized. You want to make sure that one person isn't just, running the whole thing and pretending like it's decentralized. All those things are things you have to do as entrepreneurs to make sure, you're doing it right. And if you do it right, there's no reason why politicians should be against it, because it's innovation happening somewhere in the world, making the world a better place, and it's fair and right. So, but it's, don't think you'll be able to convince anyone that it's all good. I'm just selling these tokens on the internet, and it's like, well, there's, as much as we don't agree on certain policies, we will not, people will agree that the spirit of why certain protections exist for investors were for a good reason at some point, whether or not you believe they're now, too complicated, not actually, helping anyone or whatever. If you want to jump to other questions.
Yeah. So I don't know if we can
governance tokens, but it's not going to be fun for anyone other than me.
I mean, I guess we'll jump to Christina's question. She's asking, and it's a bit fragmented, so forgive me if I butcher it a bit. As Wyoming law and other states adopt more and more, I'm assuming more of this technology or being more open-minded to this technology, it feels like a Pandora box is now open, okay? Do you see an increase in bipartisan support for blockchain regulation at the state and federal level?
It's interesting. Brittany Kaiser actually came to a lot of our, and she was instrumental when it came to what they did over in Wyoming. And I know she worked a lot on that, a couple other folks, but they actually came a lot to our blockchain working group. And Pandora's box, not necessarily, because Wyoming in terms of policy is very different than California in terms of policy. Wyoming can do something on a policy level, and it's not going to generate a lot of the same interest and attention as if California were to do that. I mean, you have companies that have moved to Wyoming to take advantage of the laws there, but the reality is that most of them want to be in states like California. I mean, even Colorado has some more favorable laws on the books, but still it's about, where's the talent and where's the place in which you want to be to allow you to be a little bit a greater chance of success and have the tools and the resources that you need around you. And so do I think it's Pandora's box? No, I think it provides an opportunity to see there are governments that are leaning into this. And I used that as a way for us to say, like, look, it's only a matter of time until more states start to move in this direction. Maybe not exactly in terms of what Wyoming is doing, but in some direction. And when this is naturally something that could be beneficial to the state of California and give California kind of like the overarching ability to dictate what policy and regulation looks in this space. If we wait too long, we're going to lose that opportunity. You're going to lose a lot of investment. You're going to lose a lot of jobs, and you're going to lose the ability to govern, but have regulations not just applicable in California, but a lot of times, there is a benefit to having seamless regulatory standards in not just one state, but in all states. And so, you don't want to be going and trying to do work in all these different states with all these different rules that you have to follow. And so if you can create some standard in California, there's a high likelihood that that's going to be adopted in another state. And when you even look at our privacy laws, you can also go to the federal government where you have a couple members that have verbatim essentially introduced our Consumer Privacy Act in Congress. Now, I went there about a year ago, to talk to them, say, don't do what we did verbatim on privacy, because we kind of had a gun to our head, so to speak. We were under the gun. We had this ballot initiative, and we needed to act quick to get it off of the ballot because of the impact it would have on businesses. But at the same time, we're a leader in that way. And what we do doesn't just have an impact nationally, it has an impact at times internationally. And I know that there are other countries in Europe and everything else that are a little bit further along on this type of regulation than we are. But we really, in California, stand the greatest chance to have the single greatest impact on this technology moving forward. Because if we do it, there's just a huge, huge level of credibility that pops up. And and that's what I've been working towards, and that's what I want to continue to work towards in this role, is to be able to work in this space to continue to legitimize this technology, to push it into the mainstream, kind of work through that taboo, work through all these things, get it accepted. And I just feel like you win California, you win everywhere. You're just going to win everywhere. And I am just so pro California. I want the state to benefit from this intellectual benefit and this technology. And there's no reason why we shouldn't get that. We are the tech capital of the world. I mean, for
Yeah.
for now.
There's a lot of people sneaking
now,
away
so-
lately. Well, blockchain folks, at least incorporating in Wyoming and things like that, but that's about the same as having, a Delaware corporation, and nobody actually goes to Delaware. My wife and I actually joked the other day and talked about, like, does Delaware actually exist? I'm not 100% sure.
Interesting question, because they kind of just
Hey,
the president. Just saying.
He says he's from Delaware doesn't mean he's from there. I mean, I've had multiple Delaware corporations. I don't think I've ever been to Delaware. So,
right. But you started that business there, and that's home. That's headquarters, and so ultimately that that's what I turned 2150 into, was that safe harbor for this technology in particular, and so I just feel like, if we could pass something like that I know that the Department of Business Oversight is, into and willing to consider, and we can just kind of get this, in front of the governor and sign, I feel like there's just a huge benefit. I mean, not a lot is needed to really attract the industry and have the industry go all in here in California, but California's got to do something, and the more time that passes that they don't do something,
So hold on.
the worse
So
it gets.
not a lot is needed, right? That's an important point. So what do you think is needed? What's missing that's not there, that's preventing people right now from jumping all into this, right?
Are you asking me?
I mean, I'm throwing
folks?
the question out there, right? Is it still the confusion behind Bitcoin and blockchain, right? And the difference, thinking that Bitcoin is just like, in the technology was just used for money laundering or criminal activity? Is it still that, like, misconception? What's preventing, like you said, more people kind of to jump in with all feet into something like this?
Well, I mean, I think first, there's a fear of prosecution. There's a fear of litigation. If I can come to California, I can start my business, but I have zero protections under law if I'm one of these businesses, and so it's really at my own risk. So if I'm a blockchain company, and I don't, that's what I tried to define what blockchain is, to create some type of, loose fitting idea of what blockchain is, to gain some type of basic regulatory framework. And I mean, and it's not just, California regulators, state regulators, you're looking at federal government issues. And so they're really relying on, I feel like the industry is really relying on states to step in and create regulation to give them some type of protection. But then when it also comes to cryptocurrencies, it's just, I can be sued. I have all this unknown. I can be sued, and there's nothing I can do about it except if I'm being treated as a security, and I get indicted or prosecuted under securities law. It's the Howey test in court, and that's it for the most part. And that is expensive, and that is just a huge risk. When you're thinking about starting your business, you want to be focused on building your business, expanding the ways in which your technology can do good and be successful, not constantly looking over your shoulder, waiting, to go down and, and be indicted, or, to be sued or whatever. I just, that is it's just a lot of fear, from what I understand. There's just a lot of fear. And so what we need is just, like I said, loose regulation, create some guardrails, create some certainty, something that allows, at least a couple of years of time where I don't have to worry about anything. I could just focus on, you got to worry about laws and following laws, but I'm not going to be prosecuted due to this vagueness in law or this non-existing language in law that offers me no protections. But it's also kind of like, I want to jump in, I want to do business, but at least tell me where the guardrails are. Right now you don't have that. I don't know where my guardrails are. I just, it's just kind of like, hold your nose and jump in and pray.
You can sort of point at another company that hasn't gotten in trouble yet, so you're like, maybe I'll do what they did, but that's the issue. Is it's one of these situations, and I've known this now from the crowdfunding days before it was legal, and then even after, and all these things, you would tell people, like, either beforehand it was like, you're securities fraud, so be careful, don't do that, whatever. Then afterwards, like, don't do that if the regulation is too extreme and you're going to basically cut yourself off at the knees as a company because of, because you let your neighbor invest in your company. You now have to basically have audited financials as if you're a public company, and that's going to cost you 5 to 10 grand a month. And that's like, that doesn't make sense for a small startup, right? That's one or more full-time employees at your company. But and startups fail because they run out of money. So but what you want is not to feel like what Ian is saying, like there's just complete uncertainty, and that's what's scary. Somebody did ask in the chat, I don't think it was in the QA, like if there's a good if I thought that what they said something about Uniswap and if that path was the right path. And the issue is nobody really knows. I think it's a decent path to follow because a 10, 15, 20 million dollars worth of VC money went into Uniswap before they did their epic token giveaway thing, airdrop, or however you want to call it. And so those 10, 15 million dollars worth of VC money came from a lot of prominent VCs that probably had really great lawyers that helped them consult on those things. And but we'll see in the next year or two what happens, right? Like it took a couple of years before they went after EOS and Telegram and things like that. And those ones, you saw the difference. One of them, their CEO went on stage and said, this token is going to make you a lot of money. And they basically got shut down completely. The other one raised more money, raised billions of dollars. But from the beginning, they said this token has no value and we're not going to allow anyone in the United States to participate. Wasn't hard for people to participate using a VPN or anything like that, and they pretended maybe that they didn't know that people were doing that, but they told us not to participate, and they told us it has no value, and then they spent some of those billions of dollars on really good lawyers to get a slap on the wrist from the SEC. But most companies like Uniswap, even at this point, their tokens are worth probably billions of dollars or whatever they're worth, can do some interesting things. But most companies just raise a few $1 million. A slap on the wrist by the SEC means being out of business. Or if you have to return, one of the main ways you get in trouble when you have securities fraud or whatever is that you have to give all the investors their money back. If you're a crypto company that got your money in some cryptocurrency that now has no value, you don't have the money to give back to everyone, which was a big problem after the 2017 craziness. So anyway, having some at least basic guardrails can help companies navigate if you're based in the US.
Well, and I will say, this is something I did want to say earlier when it got brought up, and I just kind of wanted to make this point. It's, from a government's perspective and from like a Department of Justice's perspective, for them, it's like there's transparency and who's doing what, but who is could be anyone. And so, somebody breaks a law or somebody does something, or, their fear is, how can I, prosecute, or how can I go after that bad actor if there really is no way for me to figure out who that bad actor actually is. I see it happening. I can see what they did, but if I don't know who the who is, then that puts me in a position where I can't go as to protect the consumer or protect the business or protect whoever's being defrauded. And I think, a lot of where the law enforcement perspective is coming from that place in the Department of Justice, the DAs. I mean, that's what they ultimately end up worrying about. And so, this technology is beneficial because the decentralization gives more individual control, which is ultimately, what I think all of us want and where we want to get to. But there is no way to get there without starting off with it being centralized. This technology has to be centralized to gain legitimacy and to continue to move forward. I mean, set aside all the interests that are going to come in and push against a decentralized system until they can control it and implement it and do it their own way, because they're just gonna elbow everybody else out of the way. It's government, and they're not gonna. There has to be this leads to this, leads to that, leads to that. When there is no centralization of something that is legitimate, then you're going to run into problems with government. So I feel like you have you have to implement this technology, this decentralized technology in a centralized system, in a centralized way, to gain that comfortability, which down the line could lead to decentralization. But we are.
I think it depends on the product. It depends on where people are participating from, and it depends on how you're participating with it, right? Like if it's a DeFi product that needs people to deposit money from their Wells Fargo account, they need to be going through a licensed bank and custodian to do it right and do it legally in the United States. Otherwise, then you're talking about FinCEN and you're talking about money transfer licenses and essentially becoming a bank and things like that, which is not what anyone wants to do, but what they legally have to do, right? What is this?
It's interesting, Ian, because
but we should if Adam, if you want to jump into any other
last question, but just to comment on what you said, I think you said the two words that kind of like light fires in the crypto community, and that's government and centralization. And just to move on from that point, okay, Shamari is asking, do you have any suggestions on how to directly educate policymakers about blockchain to ensure innovation-focused policy writing?
I mean, yeah. I mean, that's what I do. That's what I'm doing now.
And now that you're not in the position that you were for so long, right? And you've taken more of this, I guess, you've opened your own business, your own firm, right? What's like that word of advice, right? How can we continue down the line that you've been preaching for the last 8 years, and also beyond that?
You know, let me tell you what was really harmful to me in the policies that I carried is that nobody backed me up. Nobody from the industry backed me up. Nobody came in and said, hey, I do this work. This is why it's valuable. This is why it's important. Let me educate you as to why this bill is necessary, why this bill is needed, why this is going to lead to this, which is ultimately better for the state of California. We're going to go through an economic recession. How great would it be if this industry could come in and provide solutions, provide jobs, provide investment that pulls us out of that? Allows cannabis. We have this cannabis industry in the state of California that's really not doing much because of, the taxation, the regulation, the lack of enforcement on bad actors. It's like, payment. It's you can't bank, unless you're using a state bank. So there's just all these obstacles that, maybe blockchain and this technology could help and allow this industry to engage more in ways that allow it to be better and easier to do business and ultimately generate more money for the state to help bring us out of this recession, because there's more jobs being created, which generates ultimately more revenue for the state, and investments being made and so on and so forth. So, for me, I just felt like the challenge was just like, I never got any support. I mean, Alon Medina creating her association, that's one thing, but it's just, where was the voice? Where were all these companies, all these startups? Everybody loves entrepreneurs, even government. I mean, and I saw something, it's because, I saw one of the comments is, something, because legislators are of a different generation, they're not aware of the paradigm shift. Yes and no. Yes and no. There are more millennials now in the legislature, and they are, they're eager for this. And I was the first one, but there are a lot more. And again, at the same time, you have a lot of these older folks, which I totally agree. I mean, the members that I had to deal with that were engaging in tech policy and their ideas of what tech should be, it's kind of like, you could see the generational issues that were presenting themselves, but there are enough there, and there's enough interest there, and there's enough intelligence there to understand a good thing when it's being presented. And so, it's just figuring out, and I've thought about this, creating whether it's an association or something else that just speaks with one voice, and really the industry gets behind and actually uses it to advocate, has not only strategy on how to engage the legislature, but then also the muscle to send people in, to organize and do all these things to send the right message. But there just has to be more engagement from this community. There just was none. And I did these things, but I just did it on my own. And I'd have one company here, one company there. And so my problem was just that I always expected, I'm like, okay, I'm going to see, all of these startups, these blockchain businesses, they're going to come in, they're going to, support it. And some of them are going to come to speak on these bills. It's going to be legit and people are going to see, and nobody ever showed up. And we tried to reach out, but it's difficult. And, so
Draper going home.
hit us up if you decide to do it. Let's do it together. We got a community. Hey, think about this just as a cool California thing. We always, the two biggest crypto conferences, at least, big convention center style or big conferences in the space happened with Consensus in New York and us in LA, and us in LA not being, being a little more mainstream focused and people hanging out. And then the one in New York being the financial institution kind of stuff. With COVID, we did a virtual LA Blockchain Summit this year. We made it free, we made it international, and live we had over 20,000 unique people watching. And over the next few days, it got to like 40 or 50,000 unique individuals, which makes it probably the biggest blockchain conference in the world. And we're here in California. So we can now go to government, go to local people, go to guys like Brad Sherman, my neighbor in the district to my north, and poke that feud that I have with him and say, hey, we have the biggest group of blockchain people from around the world coming to learn about blockchain once a year here, basically 10 miles from your district. Maybe you should take it a little more seriously. Maybe listen to the people who spoke from the FTC, the special agents, the FBI agents, the CIA agents who said they'd rather criminals be working and transmitting money via blockchain versus the cash they're using today.
Not Sherman, Schiff. Adam Schiff, same area.
No, well,
relevant committee, chairman and a respected voice. When it comes to a lot of stuff.
It's absolutely wild. But we appreciate you joining us. Any last minute stuff, Adam, or anything, or should we jump into hanging out and the networking?
Yeah. Let's wrap it up. The rest of the questions are very like DeFi focused, very gray area focused, but I also want to be respectful of your time. So, Ian, you've been awesome. You're a rock star. Thanks for joining us on Blockchain and Booze. Thanks for your time. Thanks for sharing a drink with us. And before we break off into the networking section, I give us our spiel. Where can we find more about this new firm that you started? More about your work, more about yourself. Give us the takeaway.
Yeah, www.majorityadvisors.com. That's my website. If you guys have any questions or want to figure out how you can get more involved and engaged, you can do a submission right there on my website. It comes directly to my email. And I worked on this in the legislature, and I have every intention of continuing to work in this space. I've talked to a couple different blockchain companies, VC verifiable credential companies that want to continue to work in this space and do some stuff. So would love to see what people want to do.
Great.
And,
and I'll be sure to send a link in the recap emails that we send a few days afterwards. And before we break off and we end the session, I kind of want to remind everyone my favorite part of Blockchain and Booze right now, the networking session. So before I let Ian go, and for those who are new to Blockchain and Booze, I'm basically going to end this presentation mode, and we're all going to be distributed to these colorful tables where we'll be able to bounce around from seat to seat and meet everyone who's been joining us live and watching this evening's discussion. But in order to engage in this, make sure you have your cameras on, make sure you have your microphones on. So cameras on, microphones on. Otherwise, you're going to be incredibly confused. And Ian, we invite you to stay as well, depending on your availability, depending on your schedule. But we'll see you next week, guys. Ian, thanks again for your time.
Thanks, Ian.
Thanks for having me, guys. I appreciate it.
Bye-bye.